How can we tell which set of connectives are functionally complete? How can we tell which connectives are duals, etc., etc.? Let's consider. Hello, I'm Chico. Welcome to the Philosopher Channel Introduction to Propositional Logic course. We've spent the last few videos talking about functional completeness. Today we're going to go ahead and try the exercises on 6.6.3 and see if we can get some practice learning about it. Number 1 says, state whether each of the following is a functionally complete set of connectives. Justify your answers. Remember that the way that we're going to do this is we already know that not, and or are a set of functionally complete connectives. That means if we can define those connectives, all three of those connectives, using a different set of connectives, then this different set of connectives will also be functionally complete. Technically speaking, we also saw that not and by themselves are functionally complete. So as long as we could define not and by themselves, that would be sufficient. Or not and or, we also saw that that was functionally complete. So yeah, we could do that, but we're going to do not and or just for overkill. So let's try the first set. The first set is arrow and not. And because not is part of our set that we're considering, we won't need to define not. I mean, if we wanted to, we could define not, but we would just be using not to define not. So we don't need to define that. Instead, let's try to define the connective or. And we can do so using not alpha, arrow, beta. The not flips the T's and F's. And the if then, remember, only false when the antecedent is true and the consequent is false. That happens in row 4, otherwise it's true. And there we go, a truth table that is identical to the or truth table. Now for the and truth table, our formula here will be, it's not the case that if alpha, then not beta. The first not on the beta will flip the T's and F's. The arrow only false when you have a true antecedent and a false consequent. That happens on row 1. And the final not flips the T's and F's. And there we go. 2 identical truth tables. The second set of connectives are double arrow and the exclusive disjunction. And unfortunately, these are not functionally complete. And why is that? Well, they can't define something like or that has an odd number of true rows, of T rows. So let's call every row that ends up with a T like this, because of this T right here, we'll call that a T row. And every row that ends up with an F, we'll call it an F row. Now, why can the double arrow or the exclusive disjunction not give us an odd number of T rows, even if we make it super complex? Let's see. By the way, I had to look up the answer to this. So if you're like, how did he know this? Like I cheated. I didn't want to figure it out myself. It just was too much work. So you could sue me if you'd like, but I don't make any money on this. So you can't really sue me. Although if you'd like to purchase some sick merchandise, then I can make some money and then you could sue me after that. In any case, let's set up a point system where T's and F's count for 1 and 0 points. A T counts for 1 and F counts for 0 points. And I'm talking about in the alpha beta column, by the way, not in the formula column. So looking at this alpha beta column for the double arrow, the first row, you get a 1 point here and a 1 point here. That's 2 points all together. The second row, you get a 1 point here and a 0 points here for the false. That's 1 point. Then you get a 0 point and a 1 point, that's 1 point there. And then a 0 and a 0, that's 0 points. So notice that the double arrow is true whenever both component propositions are true or both component propositions are false. So that's on the top row and the bottom row. So in other words, that's on the rows where you get a 2 and a 0. The T rows for the double arrow give you a 2 or a 0 point. The F rows are going to give you a 1 point for sure, right? Every single time. Now, let's say we make some crazy formula using the double arrow. And I have a 4-row truth table here just because I don't want to get super complex. But you could make this, incredibly complex. The thing is, alpha and beta could stand for complex formulas. And you might think, well, if they're super complex, maybe in there we can shake up some odd t's, right? An odd number of t rows, just like the disjunction has an odd number of t rows. And that's what we're trying to define. But I'll use the 4-row truth table to show you that it's not possible, and just use your imagination to apply this to all the different possible number of rows. Let's pretend like we could make an odd number of t rows, right? Let's pretend like we had some kind of crazy formula that gave us an odd number of t rows. I know if alpha, if and only if beta is not going to give us that, but let's just pretend we did. Let's pretend we had a t here, a t here, and an f here. What would that give us? Well, we just saw that the t rows are going to give us either a 2 or a 0. So let's pretend this one gave us a 2, this one gave us a 0, and this one gave us a 2. And then the f rows are all going to give us 1 point. So we'll give a 1 point down there for the f row. Now, the number of points altogether that you're going to get is going to be an odd number of points. Why? Because the number of f rows has to be odd. Why? Because these truth tables are always going to be an even number of rows. And if we just got an odd number of t rows, then an odd plus an odd makes an even. An odd plus an even makes an odd. So the f rows are going to have to be odd as well. So the f rows are odd, and each one costs 1 point. That means that add them together and you're going to have an odd number of points. And then the t rows are going to be 2s and 0s, so that's going to add up to an even number of points. So you'll have an even number of points for the t rows, an odd number of points for the f rows. Add that together, you will have an odd number of points altogether. So what will that mean for us? That will mean that either alpha will be true in an odd number of rows and beta will be true in an even number of rows to get an odd total number of points. So for example, here alpha will be true, 1, beta will be true, here alpha's false, beta's false, here true, true, and then here either alpha's true and beta's false. So alpha's true in an odd number of rows and beta's true in an even number of rows, or vice versa. Alpha is false here and beta is true. So alpha is true in an even number of rows, but beta is true in an odd number of rows. Either way, it's either alpha is going to be true in an odd number of rows or beta is going to be true in an odd number of rows. So keep that in the back of your mind because that's going to be important. Now, the exclusive disjunction has the exact same thing happen, but kind of in reverse. For the exclusive disjunction, it's false whenever both component propositions are true or both component propositions are false. So notice in those rows where we had 1 plus 1, 2, or 0 plus 0, 0, those are f rows. And the rows where we have t's, we have 1 point. So now the t rows are going to give us 1 point, and the f rows are going to give us 2 or 0 points. But this is going to give us the same problem. Again, let's assume that we're going to have an odd number of t rows. Let's pick the conjunction. And we make some kind of fancy formula using the exclusive disjunction. And let's say we can get it to be, one row is true and the rest of them are false. What's going to happen? The true row, remember, is going to give us 1 point. And the false rows will give us 2s or 0s. So let's say pretend we get 0, 0, and 2. Again, that's going to add up to an odd number of points. The t's are going to be odd. The f's are going to be odd. So you're going to get an odd number from the t's because they're each 1 point, and an even number from the f's because that's just 0s and 2s, right? They're going to add up to an even number. Odd plus even equals odd. And that means that the alpha is going to have to be odd or true in an odd number of rows, and beta true in an even number of rows, or vice versa. So let's pretend this is 1 point. Let's make alpha true here, beta false here. They're both false here, they're both false here, and they're both true here. So there, alpha is true in 2 rows, beta is true in 1 row. Or we could switch the alpha and the beta on that first row. But once again, you have this time alpha is true in an odd number of rows in 1, and beta is true in an even number 2. So just like with a double arrow, you have alpha true in an odd number of rows or beta true in an odd number of rows. Either way, one of those two are going to be true in an odd number of rows. Okay, the trouble is, for a two-place connective, based on the way the matrix is set up, doesn't matter how complex the formula gets, you're always going to have the individual propositions alpha, beta, and so on true on an even number of rows. So for example, on this one, let's erase this. Alpha is true on these two rows and beta is true on these two rows. If you got a little bit fancier and had a formula with a gamma involved in there, then alpha would be true on 4 rows and beta would be true on 4 rows and gamma would be true on 4 rows. So it's not possible to have alpha true on an odd number of rows. That means that the double arrow and the exclusive disjunction can never give you an odd number of t rows. It's always going to have to be an even number of t rows. And we have some connectives like the arrow, the disjunction, and the conjunction that have an odd number of t's, so you can't define those guys using our double arrow or our exclusive disjunction. Whoo! Hopefully you followed all that. It was crazy, but hopefully that you got that. Let me know if you need more explanation. Problem 3 is the down arrow, also known as NOR. Like you can use that as a symbol instead of the down arrow. So first let's define not alpha, and we could do so using the formula alpha down arrow alpha. On the first 2 rows, we get TTs. That's this row right here. So those are Fs. On the second 2 rows, we get FF, which is this row right here. So we get Ts. And there are 2 identical truth tables. Now for alpha and beta, and the formula will be alpha, down arrow, beta, down arrow, beta. The rows that are TT look like this. They give an F. And the rows that are FF give you a T. And then for that middle down arrow, the first one is FF, which is this row right here, gives you a T. Then you get an FT, which is this row. Then there's TF, this row right here. And finally, TT. And there you go, there's AND. Now for the OR, we have alpha down arrow, beta down arrow, alpha down arrow, beta. Actually, both of those sides are alpha down arrow beta, which is just this right here. So we can just copy straight down the middle. And then we have FFs and TT. And there's your OR. The next set is arrow and AND. And that is one that is not functionally complete. And the reason is because they're both true on the top row. So that means when alpha and beta are both true, then both of those guys are true. So there's no combination that you can make with both of these guys to get a false on the top row. But then you have something like Sheffer stroke right here that has a false on the top row. So you can't define Sheffer stroke using arrow and AND. So this is not functionally complete. Set number 5 is the 12th connective and not, and this is functionally complete. So not combines with a lot of these guys and is successful. So let's try this one. That first not will flip the T's and F's. And then for connective 12, FT is a false, FF is a false, TT is a false, and TF is a true. And then the not flips all those upside down, and we get our disjunction. Now for the AND, the not flips the T's and F's, TF gives us a true. TT gives us a false. FF gives us a false. FT gives us a false. And there's our conjunction. And of course, we don't have to define the not because not is part of our set that we're using to define other ones. Set 6 is interesting. It is the disjunction or, and it's connective 4. And what's interesting about it is, first of all, we already know that the disjunction by itself is not functionally complete. Why is that? Because in the last video, we figured out that not and or together are not functionally complete together, right? So of course, or by itself could not be functionally complete. So connective 4 is going to have to add something to the table in order to make or functionally complete set, to make a set with him, with him. But the problem is connective 4 doesn't do anything. So see what I mean? First of all, in that first truth table, you have alpha connective 4 beta, and that's its just natural truth table. And notice alpha connective 4 beta is just alpha, right? TTFF. That's just, so we could use that to the same as we would use alpha, right? That's all that does for us. And then what about alpha connective 4 alpha? The TT row would be true, and the FF rows would be false. And notice we haven't made any progress whatsoever, right? We just still have TTFF. Now, what if we put beta first? The true is true. The false true is false. The true false is true. And the false false is false. But notice that's the truth table for beta. So we really haven't made any progress here either, right? We could have just used beta instead of using a connective here. What about beta connective 4 beta? The trues are true. The false falses are false. And once again, we have an identical truth table for beta. So unfortunately, connective 4 doesn't get us anywhere, right? All it gives us is alpha and beta right back again. And we already had that. So it doesn't give us anything to add to the disjunction or, and we already know that or isn't sufficient to be functionally complete. So or and connective 4 are not functionally complete. And that was a lot. So I'm going to take a break and I will see you guys in a little bit. Okay, I'm back. It was actually a couple of days of a break for me, but couple of seconds for you. Problem number 2 says, give the truth table for each of the following propositions. So let's see. The first one is B connective 14A. The first row is TT, which gives us an F. The second row is FT, which gives us a T. The third row is TF, which gives us an F. And the final row is FF, which gives us an F. And there is our truth table, FTFF. Next, we have A, connective 11B, connective 15B. So let's try this one out. First, we have to work on that connective 11. And actually, that A connective 11B is the exact same thing as what we have that set up right there. So, and then connective 15, FT is right here. TF is right here. FT once again is right here. And TF once again is right here. So all falses. Next, it's not the case that A or A connective 6B. The connective 6 part is identical to the connective 6 truth table. Then the or is only false when you have both disjuncts false, otherwise true. That happens in the bottom row. The rest of them are true. And the negation flips the T's and F's. So F, 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 T. Next, A, if and only if, A connective 3, not B. First, we need to take care of that not. Then that connective 3, let's see, TF first is this row right here. TT is this row right here. FF is this row right here. And FT is this guy. And finally, if and only if, true when both component propositions are true or both component propositions are false. They're both true here and here, both false here, otherwise false, and that happens here. So TTFT. Next, A, connective 12B, exclusive disjunction, B, connective 12A. The first instance of connective 12 is identical to our truth table. For the second one, TT is that first row. FT is this row. TF is this row. And FF is the last row. And remember, for the exclusive disjunction, only true when one of the disjuncts are true. If both of them are true or both of them are false, then it's false. So it looks like false on the top, true, true, false on the bottom. So FTTF. And then we have A, connective 12B, exclusive disjunction, B, connective 16A. Again, connective 12 is just identical to that truth table. For connective 16, TT is the first row. Then we have FT, which is this row. Then TF, which is this row. And then FF, which is this row. And then again, the exclusive disjunction, only true when only one disjunct is true. False if they're both true or they're both false. It looks like most of them are both false. Only row 2 is true. So FTFF. For problem 3, it says that we are to consider the 3-place connectives that are listed there, whose truth table are as follows. Define them using only the connectives or, and not. Now this, we can use that, that strategy that we talked about in an earlier video. What we'll do is, for each true that we got, each T row, we'll make a conjunction that mirrors the truth values of the different sentence variables. So looking at the truth table for this first connective, on row 1, we have a T row, right? It comes out true. So we're going to have a conjunction for that. And it looks like all of these guys turn out to be true. So we're going to have alpha and beta and gamma. For row 2 is an F row, so we're not going to worry about that row. We're not going to make a conjunction for that row. Row 3, we have alpha, we have beta being false, but gamma being true. So that's going to be alpha and not beta and gamma. Then we have true, false, false. So that will be alpha and not beta and not gamma. And then we have false, true, true. So that will be not alpha and beta and gamma. Then we have false, false, true. So not alpha and not beta and gamma. And then finally all falses. So not alpha, not beta, and not gamma. So those are all the conjunctions. Remember, these conjunctions are only true on those rows. On a conjunction is only true when all the conjuncts are true. So in any of the other rows, one of those conjuncts is going to be false. So the whole conjunction will be false. Now we'll make a disjunction using all of these conjunctions, and it's going to be big and nasty. So, well, you know what I could do? So pretend that's all on one line, right? You have alpha and beta and gamma, or alpha not beta and gamma, or blah, 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 just like that. If that wasn't enough, they give us another one for an exercise. So let's do the second one. And it looks like we've got this row right here. So alpha and not beta and gamma. Then this row, alpha and not beta and not gamma. This row, not alpha and beta and gamma. And this row, not alpha and beta and not gamma. And then we'll put all this into one disjunction. And again, if you're looking at this like, I don't understand why this works, you can go ahead and check out my previous video where I talk about exactly why this works. Problem 4 says, state a proposition involving only the connectives not and that is equivalent to the given proposition. So let's see here. And we know this is going to work because and not are functionally complete. So we know that we can do this. The first one is it's not the case that if A then B. And that one is equivalent to A and not B. And let's go ahead and first deal with that if then. Only false when you have a true antecedent and a false consequent, which is row 2. The rest of them are true. Then the not flips all the T's and F's. As far as A and not B, the not for the B switches all the T's and F's. And the conjunction is only true when both conjuncts are true. That only happens on row 2. The rest of them are false. Equivalent propositions. Next we have not A or B, and that is equivalent to not A and not B. First, the or, only false when both disjuncts are false, otherwise true. The not flips the T's and F's. Then on the second proposition, we got to do those nots first. And then the conjunction, only true when both conjuncts are true, which only happens on the fourth row. And there we have identical truth tables. Not A or not B is equivalent to not A and B. First, we have to take care of those nots. Then the disjunction only false when both disjuncts are false. That happens in the first row, otherwise true. Then we'll do the and on the second proposition first. Only true when both conjuncts are true, otherwise false. And the not flips all the T's and F's. And the two are identical. Not A or B is identical to A and not B. First, we got to deal with that not on the A. And then the disjunction only false when both disjuncts are false. That's on row 2. And then the not flips the T's and F's. On the second proposition, we have to deal with the not first. And then the conjunction is only true when both conjuncts are true. That's only on row 2. Identical propositions. A if and only if B is identical to not A and not B, and not B and not A. The if and only if is true when both component propositions are true or both component propositions are false, otherwise it's false. Then we'll have to take care of a couple of nots. Then the conjunctions, which are only true when both conjuncts are true. Then we have those outside knots. And then finally, the conjunction, only true when both conjuncts are true. That's on row 1 and row 4. Identical propositions. Finally, if A then B or if B then A is identical to, it's not the case that A and not A. First, the if-thens only false when you have a true antecedent and a false consequent. Otherwise, they're true. Then the disjunction is true when at least one disjunct is true, only false when both disjuncts are false, and that never happens. Okay, we'll deal with that not with the A. This is interesting because A and not A is a contradiction. And so saying not A and not A should be a tautology. So this should all end up being true. Let's see, the conjunction is only true when both conjuncts are true, which never happens. Again, this is a contradiction, so we get all falses. And then the not flips all the F's to T's. So we get all trues. So we have identical propositions. Problem number 5 starts off asking the question, what is the dual of the one-place connective 1? And that, in case you forgot what a dual is, the textbook defines it, two n-place connectives, star and dagger, are duals if star of alpha 1 to alpha n is equivalent to not dagger of not alpha 1 to not alpha n, and dagger alpha 1 to alpha n is equivalent to not star of not alpha 1 to not alpha n. So in other words, you take the one connective, right? And then the other connective, you put a not at the very beginning of the formula, and then throw nots in front of all the sentence variables. And if that is identical to the first thing, and then do the same thing in reverse, if that's identical also, then you have duals. So let's look at this. It's really a lot easier just to see rather than define. So the dual for connective 1 is connective 4. So the not flips the T's and the F's. Then connective 4 turns the F to an F and the T to an F. And that not turns both F's to T's. So we have identical truth tables. So that's half of it. Then the other half is looking at connective 4 and comparing that to connective 1. Again, the not flips the T's and F's. As far as connective 1 goes, it switches an F to a T, and it switches a T to a T as well. And finally, the not switches the T's to F's. And there we have FF here, which is identical to the FF here. So these guys are duals. Then we're asked, what is the dual of the arrow? And that would be connective 14. So again, we have a not in front of the whole formula, then nots in front of all of the sentence variables, right? And then if that leads to an identical truth table, and then we do it in the reverse and we get an identical truth table, then we have duals. Nots will flip the T's and F's. For connective 14, FF makes an F, FT makes a T, TF makes an F, TT makes an F, and finally that not out front flips all of the F's and T's. And those truth tables are identical. Next, we'll go the other way. Take care of the nots. The conditional, remember, is only false when we have a true antecedent and a false consequent. That is on row 3. And finally, the not switches the T's and F's. And we have identical truth tables right there. So these are duals. The next question, which one-place connectives are their own duals? That would be connective 2 and the not. So for connective 2, it is a T and an F. If we go through this process and we get a T and an F, then we should have our dual be itself. For connective 2, when we have an F, it remains F. And when we have a T, it remains T. Then the not flips the T's and F's. And we have identical truth tables. Now we have the not. The not's interesting because there's just looks like a bunch of knots. Remember that this guy right here, it's in this place right here. It's in the that's the place where we would put the dual connective in there. So that's the one that's the dual, and then the rest of it is part of the formula. We have the first knot, the second knot, and the third knot. Identical truth tables. Okay, and the last one is which two-place connectives are their own duals, and we have 4 of these. The first one is connective 4. First, we'll deal with the knot. For connective 4, an FF gives us an F. An FT gives us an F. A TF gives us a T. And a TET gives us a T. And the knot flips all of those. And they're identical. Next, connective 6. First, we have the knots. Then connective 6, the false false gives us a false. The false true gives us a true. The true false gives us a false. And the true true gives us a true. Then finally we have that last knot. And the truth tables are identical. Connective 11. First the knots. On FF we get a T. FT, we get an F. TF, we get a T. TT, we get an F. And then finally, we have that last knot. And we have identical truth tables. And our last one is connective 13. First, we have the knots. Connective 13, when it's FF, we get a T. When it's FT, we get a T. When it's TF, we get an F. When it's TT, we get an F. And finally, our knot. And we have identical truth tables. And that is mercifully the end of these exercises. This is, like I said before, these were hard exercises. So give yourself a nice break. You deserve it. And then go ahead and start on chapter 7. And I'll see you in the next video. Adios.